So my favorite question to ask is, what is your crypto blockchain origin story? Did you get bit by?
Origin story.
Yeah.
Bitten by a Bitcoin spider.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Well, to start out, I had a group of friends that were like Tor-touting, 4chan dwelling, privacy-concerned individuals back in high school, and they kind of coerced me into it. And I was not down for Bitcoin initially. I was very skeptical. It's a very volatile asset. I knew that people were using it to trade drugs. That's what my buddies were using it for. I was just like,
So
why is this legitimate?
You knew firsthand that it was happening, or I guess secondhand.
Secondhand.
Yeah.
So, it took me a good 2 years to really warm up to the idea that Bitcoin had meaningful applications outside of avoiding the law. And the first way that really got me deep into cryptocurrency was I became a very serious cryptocurrency miner, and that kind of started me down the rabbit hole of understanding the more technical aspects of the blockchain.
Very cool. I didn't know you did mining. So on to
all
more
that.
more mining.
So I got integrated into Bitcoin in 2008, but I had my professional career start in 2010 when I started receiving paychecks in Bitcoin. So I've been involved on the cryptocurrency mining optimization side. So developing software specifically to mine Bitcoin, then eventually developing FPGA hardware, then eventually ASICs and so on and so forth. So that's kind of been my route, and I've grown up alongside this technology, which means that I'm in a very unique position because I've got to see it grow up and advance. And it's very cool sitting here, 11 years later and seeing how Bitcoin is starting to slowly take over the world, and blockchain technology is slowly taking over the world.
Totally.
And seeing how it works in all these different countries as well has been pretty cool, I gotta say.
Very cool. Mine's not as good of a story. That's true. 13, I heard about Bitcoin, obviously had a big price spike, and came back down, and the UI sucked, I figured. So I'm like, what is going to become of this? About 3 years later, I just left it off, to the side. I've been trading for a good 20 plus years. In 16, I had to go to a conference and play in a golf tournament, and I had to listen to this idiot next to me talk about Bitcoin and cryptocurrency in general for all 18 holes. I was miserable. But when I came back, I said, hey, some of this, what he's talking about makes sense, but the biggest thing that made sense for me was the hard cap supply and the non-sovereignty piece of it. So I went down the rabbit hole, research. Next thing I know, I'm buying it. Next thing I'm trading it. And next thing I know, I rented my boat out to the CEO of CoinMe. I've got a boat over in the shipping canal. And we started a relationship, got to talking. And lo and behold, he said he needed somebody to help him out on the wealth management side. He was impressed with the knowledge that I had about the subject in general. And I was looking for a career change anyway, so I jumped aboard with CoinMe, and it's been a rock and roll ship for about a year now.
Yeah, very cool. Very cool.
Very awesome.
So let's get right to it. What's going on with Bitcoin? What happened? So, for those that have paid attention, we've kind of been in this low mode for, we're at 3,000, hovering around there for 4 months, maybe 3 months. And all of a sudden, April 1st, some people thought it was maybe an April Fool's joke. Bitcoin just spiked, right? It went to above 5. So what caused that? What do you guys think caused that?
The drop or the spike?
Let's go with the spike for now.
All right. Well, there's speculation that one of the theories I've heard is Tether's recently, which is one of the companies that produces a stable coin called USDT, and it is a cryptocurrency that's backed 1-to-1 with US dollars. And around the time that Bitcoin has started spiking, they've started minting some 400 million coins. And so $400 million worth of this cryptocurrency. And they've
Of the Tether. Yeah.
Of Tether. And in the past, they've been accused of manipulating Bitcoin prices. Bitfinex, their associated exchange, is under investigation by the U.S. Department of Justice for potential price manipulation. And this is a recurring theme in the Bitcoin markets in general, where the market is small enough where a few people with a significant amount of money can cause shifts in terms of where the trend of the market is going and influence the price of Bitcoin substantially. So one of the strong theories is that price manipulation.
I'd echo that. It is price manipulation. I would say that it's not unique to Bitcoin. Most people, I mean, it happens in stock markets all the time. Hedge funds move all of their, stock from one account to the next, or to, other investment funds that they all manage. This is a common thing to do if you want to do lots of arbitrage opportunities. So at Core Scientific, we track all of the cryptocurrency movements on a global scale, including wallets tied to certain whales, exchanges, how money flows in and out. We have a very large data science team that manages this. And it was really interesting that for some reason, $600 million moved out of a Bitcoin wallet to Tether and then back again, and it did that 3 times. The same addresses between each other. And immediately my chief data officer messages me and goes, Kristy, did you see? Bitmain's moving money over and over again. I was like, what's going on? It's like 2 a.m. at night. And so when going to China, recently coming from China, talking to a lot of the manufacturers, this is actually a common theme. It's happened for the last, I would say about 6 years or so. Whenever there's new machines being released for mining, companies will artificially inflate the price to sell off their old equipment. Specifically, Bitmain over-manufactured in 2017. A ton of equipment was made from both Canaan, Bitmain, Silicon, etc. They would either keep that equipment for themselves and mine with it, or they will artificially inflate the price, sell off the old equipment, then move on to the next stuff.
And why is that? Why are they selling off the old for the new?
To clear out the stock to make room for the new stuff. See, no one wanted S9s because the Bitcoin price had crashed. It wasn't really profitable to run them. But as soon as it went up to 4,900, it became profitable again. So the market price for a used S9 went from 125 USD, fully landed in the US, all the way up to 210. They will suddenly clear off all the old equipment, and then they'll be able to start selling out their new stuff like the S17 Pro, like the S17, and so on and so forth. And so this is a common thing. I mean, if you control 70% of the market, you're going to obviously try and do whatever you can to inflate the price and take advantage of that. So that was really kind of sad to see, but also, a recurring theme in this ecosystem.
Yeah. What have you been seeing, Brent?
Nothing. I mean, that confirmed my theory. So, I looked at it from a trader's perspective. I thought the trade was sophisticated and beautiful.
It was, yeah.
It was. If you don't know, the trade was spread across 3 different exchanges, and it was $100 million. And the 3 different exchanges that it was spread across just happens to be what BitMEX, which is a derivatives market, uses for their index. So basically, when you hit that $100 million on those order books and dried them up, you wiped out another 498 so million in derivatives shorts, basically short interest that was leveraged against Bitcoin. So that helped, exacerbate the price all the way up. And then you start this FOMO moment, and you saw quickly everybody started rolling out of altcoins. Basically, you saw all of them, even Binance Coin, which has been the best performing asset over the last couple of years, even with the drawdown of last year. It was down 10%. So you had people rolling out of these small caps, which had an incredible Q1. Also, on top of that, to Bitcoin, and that helped the whole price rise. And now it's leveled off. It's my theory was it's either a risk-on whale. I'm convinced that institutions are coming. I don't think they're here yet. I think they're investing on a VC type of scale, whether you look at Yale or Harvard or any of the endowments or the pensions funds. They're actually investing in the infrastructure because there's more money to be made in the infrastructure than there is the actual assets. So there was some kind of risk-on whale, or it was just pure manipulation. But it makes sense for the Chinese because the other thing about the Chinese market is right now they're going into rainy season. So correct me if I'm wrong, but doesn't mining get cheaper there right now?
Oh yeah. You can have a site all in for 3.5 cents per kilowatt an hour. That's insane. So I went and visited Sichuan and Guangzhou.
Explain all in.
All in. That's hosting, power, facilities, even
So not just electricity.
Not just electricity.
Yeah.
It's insane.
So what would that be the equivalent in the United States? Like rough number, just ballpark it.
Probably around 6.5 to 7.
So almost half.
Yeah.
Wow.
So that's a game changer. Now you'll see sites in the U.S. that offer 4.5 or 5. Those are also the current sites that are filing for bankruptcy, like today. So we kind of love those sites. We can go poach their assets and pick them up cheap. But this is, they're getting electricity from local governments for like half a cent.
Yeah.
So they have that bandwidth.
And to touch more on that, when we were talking a little bit before, and you were talking about that government grant that they got. We talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So, we should also talk about the fact that China's banning Bitcoin. That announcement happened while I was in China when I was talking to Bitmain, and it came up on my
Bitcoin
phone.
mining, right?
Yeah.
Specifically.
Yeah, and it came up on my phone, and I was like, oh.
Just for clarification, who here understands what Bitcoin mining is? Can you just give me a quick raise of hands?
Nice.
Right on.
Yeah, actually, and also just to level set too, Kristy, will you just kind of give a quick overview of like what Bitcoin mining entails, or like why?
Well, it doesn't entail a pickaxe. I learned that lesson the hard way.
And not the 30-minute that I know
Yes.
you
Yes. So basically just having a dedicated machine that you give some electricity to. Unfortunately, it's a lot of electricity, and it will generate passive income for you. And the goal of doing Bitcoin mining or any kind of mining is to basically get to a scale where you're producing double the profit than what you're paying to run these machines.
Yeah, so if your cost is would you say 3.5 cents?
3.5 cents all in. So the interest, so for everyone to be aware, so basically China's NRDC, which is kind of the ruling authority over what businesses are considered illegal, decided to declare Bitcoin mining a wasteful byproduct of the ecosystem. They've given the public until the 7th of May to comment, and I noticed that most of this, because I was there and reading the article in Chinese, I noticed that most of the US actually got that very wrong. So what's happened is the central government has declared this. The local governments in China are the ones giving the really cheap power away for free. So they want Bitcoin mining to stay. But what the local government usually wants is in direct conflict with the central. So they're constantly fighting. So when you talk to a lot of the hosting providers in China, they all say the same thing. Oh, no worry, we're best friends with the government. What they mean is they have a deal under the table with the local government. And sure, stuff will be safe, your equipment will be safe for a time, but the central authority, the central government, is probably smart enough that when they actually declare this illegal, where will they go to first? They'll go to Sichuan and Guangzhou, which are publicly the largest places for mining at scale. So what was really interesting to learn as well is that a lot of these crypto companies or manufacturers in China are starting to get grants by governments, by local governments, to invest into artificial intelligence. And what they're actually doing is they're deploying all these Bitcoin mining machines at scale to fuel their AI development and fuel the developers there. So when you control 70% plus of the Bitcoin market, obviously any action you do is going to be a huge influencing factor. And that was quite apparent in China. Very apparent.
Yeah. So Brent, you talked about this, the FOMO afterwards. So so this all starts now. Retail investors start getting in, or people in the state side start getting in. Let's talk a little bit about what's that effect. Like, is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? What's in line coming up now?
Is it a good thing that retail investors are getting into Bitcoin?
Well, I'm talking about as a result, retail investors getting into Bitcoin as a result of price manipulation, right? If we're saying that that's what caused it.
I mean, does it matter at the end of the day?
Maybe
people are going to invest not because of the price of Bitcoin. They're going to invest because of the product. Right?
Yeah.
That's at least I think that's why as an investor I should invest in a technology, because of its technology roots or its product roots.
I disagree.
Yeah?
I actually think that people will invest in Bitcoin when they think that at the point that it continues to grow consecutively or grows enough that they're not going to lose money.
Yeah.
And that's what happened in 2016 and 2017. Is that at first people they're not investing in Bitcoin because its volatility is its saving grace. People aren't going to buy Bitcoin because it's so volatile that they don't know whether they're going to be able to get their money out in a way that they can deploy it to other stuff when they need it, right? But when the price starts going parabolic, there's that element of FOMO, and there's that element of it's going to keep going up forever. Year after year, Bitcoin's been, the very bottom price has not been below the last year. Like, it's just been growing, quote unquote, exponentially. And once people have that expectation that Bitcoin's not going to drop below a certain price, that's when they're going to buy it. And that's why at I'd say every few years, there's a moment in the market where this delusion kind of dissipates. And people are just like, yeah, we've reached the top, we need to start liquidating. And then now you get the reverse herd mentality. You're shaking out all the people who weren't necessarily invested because of the technology or any other element of it, just because they wanted to make money. And once you get to a bottom where people have kept enduring losses and the market keeps slumping and people are losing confidence in it, eventually you'll shake out all the people who weren't interested in holding, like, super long term, and eventually another manipulation like this will happen and pump the market back up. And retail investors will jump in and say, oh, it's going to go up and it's going to keep going up. Year after year it's been going up, and there's going to be another set of FOMO.
Yeah.
It's a cycle. It's happened over and over and over again, and people are starting to realize that either at some point this is going to equilibrate and Bitcoin's going to trade sideways, it's going to become stable as an irrelevant kind of alternative asset, or it might become a supplement to like a nonpartisan government asset, like something that's independent of the fiat system, which obviously has more upside. Wences, he sits on the board of PayPal. He wrote an essay about this in May, and he was talking about the different potential outcomes for Bitcoin. So he says that 20% chance Bitcoin becomes semi-irrelevant. It's a good alternative asset, kind of like gold. It'll have a smallish market cap and it'll trade sideways indefinitely. The other alternative is it becomes an alternative like fiat currency that's not a government, non-political kind of currency, kind of like the metric system where no one really controls it. It's kind of an open system that people can use to move money around. And the last alternative is that just kind of fades into irrelevancy. People lose confidence in Bitcoin that this doesn't have value anymore. The idea that there's intrinsic value in Bitcoin or that some other alternative comes along that's better for remittances or better for being a store of value comes along, and Bitcoin just becomes irrelevant.
So Brent, you work with retail investors. What's been happening there? What are they asking you? What are they thinking about right now? Are you getting more phone calls?
What's Bitcoin? That for sure. When we try to describe it, for us it's pretty simple, especially to private investors. We were talking about trading and what's going to take it up and what's going to take it down there. I think institutions are going to drive it up. I think there's going to be FOMO amongst institutions, and then there's going to be FOMO against retail over time. And what's going to happen is we have political risk across the world at its highest ever been. We have debt at its highest it's ever been. And the sooner you start realizing that everything that you value in life is rated or tied or pegged to a dollar that's dependent on a government, and you can actually own something that's independently and self-sovereign and basically lives inside of computers for all that matter, you can own that. It'll close in on a store of value. And I think what the FOMO is going to happen is way up there. Billionaires and multimillionaires are going to realize that having one Bitcoin is more valuable than their real estate that they own. Because there's only two things that I know of that I have a finite supply: time and Bitcoin right now. Now, software bugs, we've had them in the past. They may happen again. That may hurt Bitcoin. It may take it down all. It can go to zero. So this is not so when we talk to our clients, this is not a thing that you go take a second mortgage out on. This is not a thing you put on your credit cards. This is a thing where you look at your liquid net worth and you say, okay, I've got $100,000 in the bank. I'm going to make a bet two ways. First, I'm going to go buy a commodity that's got a fixed supply, and I'm just going to buy a little bit of it. Second, our Fed is playing, and Bank of Japan and all the acronyms across the world are in the biggest monetary experiment in human history right now. And they just went from hawkish back to dovish because a president pressured them on Twitter. That's ridiculous. These are economists. We have put our monetary policy in the hands of humans, and we've done a very good job. We live in the United States. We've seen about 2% inflation year over year. We've got it good. But we were talking early, Venezuela, not so good. One of our associates just went to Argentina. It's not good down there. So does fiat end that way? We don't know. We have checks and balances in the United States. Not a lot of these other countries do. So the bet that you're making when you buy a Bitcoin is nothing more than buying a store of value, kind of like gold. It gets compared to gold. I don't like that analogy because I think it's beyond gold. It's an asset, it's a currency, and it's a network all wrapped in one. But it's also a bet against the Fed. It's also a bet because it's code and mathematics wrapped up into monetary policy. And when you get your head around that, and you start thinking about that, and you start thinking about not what it can do next year, not what it's going to do in 2025.
That's what people like to buy.
What's it's going to do in 50 years? Because it's 10 years strong. It's the largest network in the world. Is that right?
Yep.
Largest network of computers in the world is Bitcoin. And it's only 10 years old. That's crazy.
It's 10 years old? Exclamation point, I would say.
Yeah.
That's
It is
crazy.
crazy. And the other thing is no other technology in the world has managed to unite anarchists and governments. That's a really big message and a big story.
Catchphrase of the day.
Yes.
I mean,
So one thing you want to look at is just look at M1 supply, which is money, and you can break down a list of countries, and you can go see the amount, and then take Bitcoin's market cap and put it up against that, and you'll see it's about, I don't know, it's like 18 or 19 right now. It might be number one in 20, 30 years. It might have the number one supply and value throughout the world, and and at the end of the day, it's a digitally native asset that we can take anywhere. I can take it across a border. You know, I can't take gold, I can't take cash, I can't take land, I can't take it anywhere. That's why when I think of a billionaire and I want to stake my wealth, when Bitcoin is 20 or 30 years old, and when it gets to that point in time, we're going to feel rock solid about it as just a society in general. And if you have a billionaire that knows that he can put all that wealth in his pocket and walk around with it, or he's got some kind of secure storage, because custody is going to get proven out, and there's things being built on top of it. They're incredible. You know, the Visas, the PayPals, the Venmos are all being built out on top of it right now. But as a store of value, you want to have at least one of those coins because, and I'm a little over here, but I think we're going through a wealth transformation event over the next 20 to 30 years, and it's because of Bitcoin.
I will reiterate what Len Cesara said about investing in Bitcoin. It's irresponsible if you put too much of your money into Bitcoin. I'm talking about over a few percent of your net wealth.
100%.
But
agree.
it also is irresponsible if you do not invest in Bitcoin because the potential payout for if it does take out is more than 10x. It might even be more than 100x in terms of your investment. So a 1% investment in Bitcoin, although the chances that it becomes some global world currency or something like that may not be, it's hard to imagine what those probabilities are. It's impossible to predict.
Yeah.
But it could become the majority of the gains from your portfolio from a 1% investment.
Yeah.
And the downside is that you lose that 1%.
So it's non-correlated and it's asymmetric. So what you're going to see is if it continues to do what it's done over the last 5 years, and understand it's been the best performing asset over the last 5 years, you're going to see institutions, because they have fiduciary duty, they're going to go to their clients and say, I should have told you a few years ago, but you should buy some of that Bitcoin, Adam. And that's what they're going to start doing to very wealthy clients, especially if products are developed, like maybe backed with their ETF that's actually delivered in Bitcoin, stuff like that. They're going to go to their clients and they're going to tell them to invest because think about it, the market right now is all-time highs. I'm an investor, I got a lot of money, but I want to make more money. How am I going to go get my 10, 20% return? Well, you can do that if you just put a small percentage of your portfolio in Bitcoin 5 years ago, and that's all you had to do.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting when you're talking about, the mathematics, the computation, like trusting the computers aspect of it, right? Like what I find the most fascinating about Bitcoin is that it's really the only decentralized blockchain, right? Like
Yes.
we talk about how decentralizing blockchain is, but at the end of the day, the only truly decentralized blockchain is Bitcoin, right? Like, I guess there's people that can manipulate it, there's people that can hold lots of it, and they can do a lot of control. but you know, would you trust?
Every market is manipulated, so
Yeah.
I don't care what market you're in. Every one of them is manipulated.
I would also say that it's problematic that it's also hard to not have manipulation on Bitcoin because it's so decentralized.
Yeah, yeah. So where do we go from here? So now that Bitcoin's at 5,000, are we going to start seeing people spending their Bitcoin? I personally don't think anybody's going to spend their Bitcoin on things. Like I hate the analogies when people talk about like comparing like Bitcoin transactions to like financial transactions, or sorry, not financial transactions, but like merchant transactions or commerce transactions, because
Can't stand it.
yeah, I don't like it because one, it's people aren't spending their Bitcoin to buy pizza anymore, right? Like, would you say like buying your
Speak for
pizza?
yourself, man.
Well, are they? I mean, is it a good option to buy pizza with Bitcoin, or should you just hold on to it? Should you hodl it?
I will have my first bank account in 27 years, probably tomorrow, because I've just lived off Bitcoin my whole life.
Yeah.
I mean,
Okay.
Wow, that is raw.
Yeah.
for people that have lived and breathed this tech, we just use it every day, like we would any kind of currency.
Interesting.
I mean, we don't see it as necessarily an investment. We just see it as no different to USD, more convenient than USD.
Yeah.
So
I'd say there's still too much, as someone who doesn't live and breathe Bitcoin, because I have other volatility concerns, and
Yeah.
like I want to be integrated into the regular financial system. Like we live in the U.S.
yeah, I'm learning that.
I'm not an anarchist about, oh, I don't want to use Venmo, I don't want to use PayPal, because those systems are built really well. They're very efficient, they're very cheap. There's no reason for me to switch over to Bitcoin other than my enthusiasm for the technology.
Well, I want to touch more on that, Kristy, because like, so I guess one of the assumptions I always have is like, man, I'm like, why would you want to spend your Bitcoin if it's gonna hypothetically continue to go up in value, like what we've been talking about, or so forth? Like,
Well,
is
think about, why do you spend your USD?
because it, right?
Because
Well,
you need to, and why
same thing
why
with-
not just have it in a bank account, recurring value?
Yeah.
I mean, you don't go and spend all your Bitcoin all at once.
For sure.
I mean, the iPad in my office is a testament to why you don't spend all your Bitcoin.
Yeah.
But you know, just start using it as a day-to-day currency. I mean, there's no harm in that.
Yeah.
I mean, generally for myself, I keep a nice stash in a cold wallet, and I just don't touch it.
Yeah, yeah. I know a guy who said, like, at the height of the market, or basically sometime last year, he goes, you know, I have a $1 million Tesla, and the reason why he has $1 million Tesla is because he used Bitcoin to buy his Tesla,
Yep.
like before, and then like if he wouldn't have spent that money on that Tesla, it would
Yeah.
have been worth $1 million.
Well, now it'd be worth like 5,000.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So
You always have those regrets, right?
Totally.
the
You're like,
problem with that analogy is that it just like completely disregards accounting in
Yeah.
general. It's just like the price of a Bitcoin is whatever someone will pay for it right
At that
now.
point,
At that
yeah,
point.
of
And
course.
people saying that they regret spending their Bitcoin back then is just like straight out wrong.
Yeah.
Like it's the same reason why like anytime you purchase a Bitcoin, the problem isn't that the Bitcoin's going to appreciate in value. The problem is that it's hard to buy more Bitcoin, or there's friction in terms of replenishing that supply.
So I think of it like a savings account, checking account. My savings account is Bitcoin, and I use other cryptos. You know, Litecoin is a good one if you want to send money to somebody. It's because the fees are super, super cheap. They're cheaper than Bitcoin. So, you know, I kind of, if I need to, I just convert it to something else and send it. So I don't, and I go back to, you know, I think we're a long way from it being a bona fide spending currency. I think it's more of a novelty from a spending perspective right now. But because we live in the United States and everything's convenient for us and we have everything on our phone. Understand the other communities outside of this United States using a lot of paper still. In Hong Kong, you can't take a snapshot of your check and deposit it. They don't have fancy apps like that. So that's one of the reasons you see 4 out of 10 in the Asian Pacific communities going right to crypto, is because this is their first engagement with really any kind of digital application of money.
Yeah.
So that's, you know, it's an important fact. If you look at the Latin area, because we've done a lot of research there, mostly paper based. So you got to think about that too. If we're going to use cryptocurrency as a spending currency, we're going to have to, you got to have some kind of smartphone device, and then B, we're going to have to teach a lot of people how to use it properly so they don't use it wrongly.
Yeah, totally.
I will play off that. There's not to say that Bitcoin is just a store of value or that's a novelty for spending. There are real applications. So, for example, I manage a team of journalists, and we're located all over the world. We have people working out of Africa. We have people working out of India, in places that they don't have access to a lot of financial services, or PayPal won't touch them because there's too many risks of fraud. By having Bitcoin, I've now been able to employ people in these high-tech places that are competent and previously inaccessible to the global market, because now we have a way to pay them in a way that makes sense.
Very awesome. Very cool. Well, I want to open it to a couple questions. If anybody has a question from the audience, we have light rules when it comes to questions, and that is just simply that it is a question. So just try not to do like some long comments and then expect like an answer off of your comment. And then two, just try to ask your question like 20 seconds, so that way we can make sure we have time for people to ask those. Does anybody have a question?
Fascinated by you. Question? No, because I'm really fascinated by the usability. So, like, how do you pay your rent living in the States?
Well, I've just moved to the U.S., so I don't know yet. Is my answer.
Talking more.
Yes, but I mean, you can have a Coinbase card, deposit it with Bitcoin and just pay your rent that way if you have a landlord that accepts that. Otherwise, I mean, you can just convert the Bitcoin to cash. But I'm pretty sure that there are rules around how you do that in the U.S. So that's a good example. But I mean, in Ukraine, I paid all my rent with Bitcoin. Same in Sweden. Still paid taxes on it, so it's treated the same.
Yeah.
So.
Very cool.
U.S. is a learning curve, though. I won't lie.
Yeah, and why do you think that is? Why do you think the U.S. has been a little bit slower? We have China that is just crushing it when it comes to Bitcoin, and then a lot of European countries the same. Why is that?
I haven't figured it out yet, but I think it's everything gets bogged down here in policies and processes, and I understand why that is. It's for safety. I get that, but at the same time, going to China and just seeing they're on a whole nother level. And I'm thinking if we just ran sometimes with our technology and we stop trying to, wrap it up in rules and policies and wait for government approval on things, we'd be in a much more advanced place in the US.
Yeah. Do you guys think it has to do with like legacy systems also, right? Like that's kind of my thought, right? Is that there's so much legacy financial technology.
There's an
and
important
financial,
report.
right?
There's an important report that came out today, right?
Yeah.
Mueller report.
Oh yeah.
You know how that was delivered?
People use checks here as
With a CD.
Oh seriously? It was on a CD?
CD. They had to go find a computer that had a CD-ROM so they could read the report.
Who does that?
Exactly.
Who does that?
This is our government.
Wow.
Do you think they're going to understand crypto or Bitcoin?
And then there are vested interests in like the credit card lobbies that don't want.
Yeah.
Yes, there's lobbyists run this country.
Right.
The super PACs run this country, so they're going to make sure that.
I'm not going to go that far, but I will say that they do not want something like a cheap alternative to credit cards to emerge, and they will do everything that's possible to stop it. Same reason why like QR payments aren't taking off.
Right, yeah, because if you're getting margin on every single credit card transaction, and you're basically saying, hey, let's allow for us not to get that margin anymore, right?
Well,
It's not in the bank's financial interest.
MasterCard's got a lawsuit they're fighting right now. I think it's $6 billion
Why is that? I'm sorry.
through exchanges.
Oh,
through
wow.
exchange fees.
Wow.
Over exchange customers. When they went from, like if I go to Europe and I paid with my MasterCard,
Yeah.
they were basically overcharging you. $6 billion lawsuit.
Dang.
Crazy. That's crazy.
And these are the people we're trusting every day.
Yeah. Yeah, that's crazy. So you talked about the Coinbase credit card. That was kind of some recent news, right? With
2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, but there's
So
been like there's all sorts of credit cards.
Totally.
For Bitcoin. Like if you have, I think the other company that I used to use, I can't remember their name, but I know Kraken also had a card. There was Wirex as well for the UK.
yeah.
So they're pretty convenient.
I honestly don't know too much about how that's working from the from the back end side of that. As far as like the MasterCard, is it that it's just kind of pegging your Bitcoin, and then?
Oh yeah. So basically the card has an address tied to it, a wallet address.
Okay.
You can fund that wallet address, and at the time of payment, then it just checks what the spot price is for the coin.
So it's kind of like a debit card.
Yeah, it's a debit card. Yes.
It just does like a market seller.
Yeah.
On that. Interesting. Okay,
So it makes
cool.
it super
Makes sense.
convenient. And I remember there was this really shady card as well. I think it was called a Wanji card, and you basically gave them $5,000 and they sent you a bunch of $100 cards because that was the max limit, and then you could just spend those. So there's a lot of different products out there.
Nice. Kind of in that same vein, what are your thoughts on the on products like Celsius Networks or the different investing?
For loans.
No, yeah,
Crypto loans.
yeah, the crypto investing. So sorry, not the investing. What is it called? The Bitcoin savings accounts. You know what I'm talking about? So like Celsius Network, like you give them your Bitcoin, they'll give you like 7% on your money, basically.
I think it's really sketchy.
Yeah, I agree with
I don't know
that.
where they're getting the rate from.
I've read through their terms
It's
of service
most
and not
likely-
good protections.
Wow.
Yeah,
really? Yeah.
most likely it's marketing dollars going towards that rate of return, and it's a certain period. I haven't dived in it because it seems sketchy. Like I said,
Yeah.
I'm not going to give any money. I'm not going to lock my Bitcoin away with somebody else. At the end of the day, what we try to educate is self-custody is a good thing as long as you're competent in it. And if you need to be competent in it, because if hyperinflation or inflation came in or things got crazy or system shut down or banks shut down for days on end, what are you going to do?
Yeah.
If you got power laptop and a USB device with Bitcoin on it, you can do a lot of things.
Will you touch real quick on self-custody versus like a custodianship, just to
Sure. So, like, if you're buying with Coinbase and you're keeping it on Coinbase, you're custodying with them. So they own your Bitcoin, you don't. Matter of fact, they can decide what address you send it to. They hired a company, I can't remember the name of it, but they're going to track your wallet address now, where your Bitcoins go in and out of. Probably up to 5 or 6 addresses. I don't know how many it is. Versus self-custody, you can go get a USB device. You can store it on that USB device, and then you can lock that USB device in a safety deposit box or safe, and your Bitcoin's on that. And as long as you have the program and that Bitcoin's on that stick, you've separated them. There's a great one called Cold Wallet that even takes another step to where it takes 2 steps to get to the computer, so that you never, really. You have to have everything in front of you to actually access the Bitcoins. And that's self-custody. That goes back to what we originally had when we were bartering things, whether it was animals, she cells, whatever it was. We used to have our own things that we bought things with. And what we've done is the institutions, the legacy systems have built in this trust factor because we were too lazy as a society to say, you know what, I trust you with my $1 million. I'd rather do that than hold it on myself and for fear of getting ripped off. And there's absolutely a trust element there. But if you're not holding a whole lot of it, I absolutely suggest learning self-custody. I would also suggest learning how to move Bitcoin from wallet address to wallet address. Go get 3 or 4 of them. Move it around, have fun with it, learn the fees, learn how to take a public block explorer, go in and look at it. And this is the things that we try to sit down with our clients and actually educate them on. So you actually know how to use it, you know what it is, you can see it, and when you can see it and feel it, it becomes more real to you.
Right. Does CoinMe do custodianship also?
We're a non-custodial wallet.
Non-custodial.
We are we're going to be upgrading our wallet in a few months here, and we're actually going to have a custody option if you want to choose that. I still promote those self-custody, absolutely. I don't know how you guys feel.
Self-custody, though, what I've learned, especially at Core Scientific, is sometimes with services like BitGo, for instance, it's actually considered really high risk, especially if you're positioning to be a public company, to hold crypto yourself. So having it with a custodial service is kind of how public companies de-risk themselves. Basically, I've learned that public companies like to have someone else to see. So when you have your custodial option, you'll be getting a call from me.
Correct.
And I also say from a pragmatic standpoint, if you're going to be trading or you think you're going to be needing to sell your assets within a year or within a certain time frame, then obviously having it stored in a cold wallet can be a detriment because it might take some time to move that
Cumbersome.
it's cumbersome.
Yeah.
Move it into the market and actually actively start trading that. So there is some friction, and that friction is necessary to make sure that your Bitcoins are secure, but you have to take that into consideration. What am I using these assets for?
Real quick, let's talk about, for those that don't know, cold storage versus hot storage or warm storage. What do you call
Hot
not
wallet,
hot wallet? Yeah.
versus cold wallet.
Yeah.
So, a cold wallet is basically something that's independent of any third-party institution. It's not accessible via the internet or a wireless system. So you cannot communicate with this device unless you have access to a physical device or unless you have access to some independent unit that's not connected to another network. So a hot wallet is connected to a larger network, typically the internet, and it means that you have easier methods for transferring those digital assets. And that usually is on like an exchange like Coinbase or another custodial service.
Yeah. What other questions we have out there?
We talk about the limitations of Bitcoin, because you see a lot of altcoins coming out with fancy features in the face of it. But when I dug into Bitcoin, like real enthusiasts say, well, we could do that if we wanted to. Is there any true hard restriction on what Bitcoin can do if developers chose to?
So, as someone who's writing applications today on Bitcoin, which is a pain, the only restriction is the block size. There's a ways around that by combining blocks. That's really the only restriction today. Most of the opcodes have been restored, but the original opcodes that you needed for actually writing a generic script in Bitcoin are all there. So you can build an application if you want, and in fact, people used to, especially back in 2010, we used to build clocks, chess games, some really cool stuff on Bitcoin that at the time we were like, oh, this is so cool. Someone built an NES emulator on Bitcoin.
Nice. So for like the Mario
Yes,
points, you're getting Bitcoins
Super
or
Mario
Satoshis?
Bros. Yeah.
Every time you get a
That would
power
have been
up.
cool. We weren't that creative. So there are applications. Now, why do people develop on things like Ethereum instead? Well, because Ethereum has a debugger. Ethereum has an IDE. Ethereum was built with developers in mind. Ethereum is just so much easier to use. The greatest example is, why do you program in Python? Why do you program in assembly when you have Python? Well, sometimes you do assembly because you want to be able to have control over where you place your bits. But, Python's just easier to get your head around. That's why we call them human-readable languages. So Bitcoin today isn't a human-readable language. It's a pain. But if we really wanted to, yes, we could make it an application.
To clarify, when we mean we, it means like a very large pool of stakeholders. So you have to
Yes.
convince a lot of people in this we that that's something worth doing. And one of the factors that people like about Bitcoin is that it's so hard to change. Part of the security from Bitcoin is that it's not upgraded frequently, and the network is so distributed, and there's so many stakeholders and so many decision makers that if they wanted to change it, it's going to be a hard uphill battle.
Doesn't Blockstream do 3-month updates though? Every 3 months, they do a commit to their to the GitHub
Yes,
for
they do.
Bitcoin Core. But I mean, those are usually just bug fixes, vulnerabilities. Bitcoin just recently had 3 CVEs as well, which was actually really cool. That's when you know you've advanced as a technology, when you have CVEs, which is pretty cool.
Go ahead.
Any comments on the Lightning Network?
Lightning Network? The Torch?
The Torch is awesome.
So I don't know. I'm skeptical about the Lightning Network because I'm not sure if it's a usable solution for solving payments. But maybe you have a different perspective on this.
The Lightning Network is really meant for things like coffee. It's meant for tiny, fast payments that don't really need to be clogging the main chain, especially for that fast, frictionless payment. As soon as we get our head, as soon as we understand that the Lightning Network is really like cents, and Bitcoin's like dollars, then it becomes more understandable.
So there's merchant payments,
Yeah.
commerce payments, that sort of
Really,
thing.
really small stuff though.
Can you talk about actually setting up the infrastructure needed to make the Lightning Network successful? Because that's my main reservation about it.
Well, I mean, Casa Hodl made this pretty easy, right? They sell Lightning nodes, and you just get a Lightning node, and then there's everything you need on it, and then you can just fund you can just buy some coins and fund your wallet, and then you're ready to go. I will say that the Lightning Network itself, especially Starkness, she's done a great job of creating products to make the Lightning Network accessible. They just came out with a Google Chrome extension, I think. It's
So like
it's
a MetaMask equivalent?
yeah, it's TipMe, and basically everyone, if you install the extension, you'll see on
Jack did that, and like that's what we're like, what?
yeah, you see it. You'll see it on all the Twitter profiles. There will be a button, and you can basically tip someone with the Lightning Network. And I will say that I had this experience when we drove to one of our data centers. A client that was with us was like, "Oh my God, I want to buy pizza. I'm super hungry." and there's a website called Lightning Pizza. So you can buy pizza with the Lightning Network. And I kid you
Does
not,
it convert it to Domino's or?
it does.
Yeah.
And I kid you not, it was faster to buy a pizza on the Lightning Network than it was to actually buy through Domino's.
That's funny.
So he was super excited and jazzed about that. But it's okay to be skeptical.
Yeah.
It's actually very
It's
healthy.
very healthy.
It's incredibly healthy. And you know the Lightning Network has to go through 10 years of stress tests.
And it's only a year old?
Yeah,
Like, it started nothing.
yeah.
It was just an idea on a piece of paper. I mean, it's pretty incredible how fast it's grown. I think it's got like $5 million in the channel now.
Yep.
And more nodes are coming on every day. And if you really want to geek out, you can go get a Raspberry Pi and create your own node. The software's out there.
Has Elon got the torch yet? I've been
I don't
tracking
know.
that.
I don't know.
Oh, man.
I lost track of the torch.
Oh.
But here's what's cool about Lightning. And Lightning, basically people were passing Satoshis or cents from one another. And it's like all of us just passing from one person to the next. But it was going across the globe. It went from Israel to Iran. There aren't too many monetary transactions that have happened between Israel and Iran. They hate each other. So that's super interesting, and that's how far this technology can take us.
Sounds like a good header from Israel to Iran.
Yeah. Very cool.
Go ahead.
What sort of math generally goes into a proof of work algorithm, and is it possible to use a proof of work algorithm to perform scientific computation?
I like
So-
you.
Yeah, so what type of math goes into that?
So hash algorithms. There's a bunch of them. When you want to design a proof of work algorithm, you have to first pick which hash you're going to build on top of. This could be SHA-256. It could be one of the NIST applicants this year. So you pick things like Grossel, and these are all algorithms for cryptographic proofs that people have built white papers on. And most of the major coins will pick something that's been really well studied, and then they will build on top of that. Some of the, what we call, my politically correct terminology is altcoins. They will
Correct.
yes,
Sorry.
I'm being trained. They will bastardize the cryptographic algorithm, and they will just basically chop a bit of SHA-256D here, combine it with Ketchat, combine it with Grossel, and they'll make some sort of Frankenstein monstrosity.
That sounds secure.
Yeah, I know, right? And that's where people like me get huge speed ups. Can you use proof of work for something reusable? Of course. But you have to first decide what is going to be your useful work that you're going to accomplish, what is going to be your target hardware base, and how are you going to monetize the byproduct that you're generating. It took me a while to come around to it, but I did realize that, yeah, okay, Bitcoin proof of work is actually useful. It's useful for securing Bitcoin. It took me a while to come to that realization.
Go ahead.
Since on altcoins, you had kind of mentioned, I know something that really brings people into Bitcoin is decentralization. What do you think about other assets that are more centralized, that are working with banks, kind of like Ripple or something? Is there any future for those?
Of course there is. I think an important thing to understand is that things like Ripple are teaching people about using alternate forms of finance. And that's a great message. That's something we want to support. Ripple was specifically created to just help banks with some of their transactions and make it fast and frictionless. And it's done a lot of great work as well. Do I personally believe that it's a good use of investment? No. Do I personally support the technology? No. But I can't understate that they have been able to jump into an avenue and start working with banks in a way that we could never have achieved with Bitcoin 4 years ago. And that's a powerful story. I mean, the more people we get, one of Ripple's big things is that they do compare themselves to Bitcoin. When you compare yourself to a technology, obviously someone that you're working with is going to go and evaluate the competition. So in their own strange way, they have gotten, banks interested in Bitcoin. They have gotten banks interested in this decentralized finance and this fintech, which I think is good. It's good.
So are you asking from an investment perspective or from a technology perspective?
I guess maybe technology? I guess both.
Because from a technology perspective, there's a lot of companies that I think are doing fantastic work, like Ripple, and they're making a ton of progress in terms of the cryptocurrency field. But when you're talking about whether I think XRP is a good investment, that's a completely different story, because there's a lot of concerns when you have an alternative cryptocurrency that has a high level of centralization, a lot of risk associated with it, and the mechanisms for controlling its supply and mechanisms for controlling how that asset's going to appreciate are not necessarily aligned with what the holders are going to have. And now the price of those assets, because the markets are so volatile, are driven by what people are speculating on what's it going to be. And that could be anywhere.
So JP Morgan coin just came out. What are the similarities between JP Morgan coin and Ripple? Same thing?
Same thing. We got to understand about Ripple's three things. Ripple is a company. Then you have X-Rapid technology. That's the technology. XRP coin, I don't know what it is. It has no value. It's completely centralized. The circulating supply is a huge debate. Huge debate because there's zero.
30% is circulating, but 10% of that's held by the founders. So there's actually 20% circulating supply. 60% is held in locked up escrow.
Pre-mined, right?
Yeah. Well, it's just generated. It wasn't even.
But there's been zero transparency behind it. That's the point. That's the debate that's out there.
I think that's what they want to create. Though. That's
Oh, yeah.
why the
No,
banks are trusting it.
That's kind of like.
So XRP, Ripple, the company, probably doing good things. But I think what you're going to see is just with JPM coin. I mean, they're going to create their own private blockchain. They're going to use it on wholesale transactions. Those wholesale transactions, they take probably 30 days to settle at least. Have multiple audits. So this is going to reduce those wholesale transactions, moving their money across the world to, I don't know, maybe 7 days or less, with a whole lot less audits. That means less people. That means less reliant on the big four when they come in and do the audits on their transactions. And you got to realize in 2008, Morgan Stanley was bailed out by a Japanese company. $7 billion they loaned Morgan Stanley. Because it was on a Friday and the market had closed, when they made the deal, they had to write them a check. And guess what? That couldn't be deposited until Tuesday. So that's needs to be eliminated. If we need to save companies or these companies need to buy and move money around, this is how they're going to do it. So I ultimately see, I think XRP has or Ripple that is, can educate, and I think they can go and educate the mid-majors and the small banks, but I think the big banks are just going to create their own private blockchains at the end of the day.
Totally agree. Definitely agree with that.
I kind of think that this is kind of the effect that blockchain has in general, where you have these companies with really bad, outdated systems, and the only thing that gets them to realize, like, wow, we need to build better database and information structures, just like, oh, blockchain can solve it. When really it's just they need to upgrade their technology.
The world's falling apart, but here's a check and you can cash it Tuesday.
Question kind of tying into that. We talked about Latin America and usability, and what you said about using cash. Like, I'm still the guy that pays with cash everywhere, and here in Seattle, that's like weird. You know, but, yeah,
It's probably a challenge in some places.
To have all that, but my question: he's Venezuelan, I'm Latin. Okay, weird example. I ask everybody this question, and nobody has feedback. Tomorrow, change of government. You know, like new government is gonna come, take my family. I have $200,000 in cash. I want to come to America with my cash. How do I move that cash into crypto quick?
Go on to local
Bitcoins.com,
and then
yeah.
start meeting up with shady people and handing them stacks of cash, and they will send you bitcoins.
Right on.
So we're working on that as a company. We're trying to break into Latin America. We've got a lot of relationships in Japan. They're trying to help us with that too. We've got an associate that we hired on the private client side. So we're actually helping in creating those transactions. $200,000 it's going to be a challenge, especially with cash, because you have to somehow get to the United States, and the only way to get to the United States right now is really through SWIFT. That's the challenge.
SWIFT is so bad. I use it a lot, and it's such a bad experience using SWIFT. It's a pain in the ass.
And with the currencies inflating how they are, basically going into hyperinflation in Venezuela, the central banks understand with SWIFT, it goes from the bank to the central bank. and the central bank still has to authorize the transaction. They can choose to say, nope, no money's leaving the day, and shut it down. So that's the
So
the
there's no
challenge.
way around it.
There really isn't right now. You know,
Localbitcoins.com.
Yeah, localbitcoins.com.
Our, Rolando had incredible stories. I mean, there are caves being set up in buildings. And when I say a cave, it's really just a building like this where we walk into and it's completely dark, and it's basically but surveillance equipment to make sure that nobody can hear you or talk to you, and there's no internet surveillance or any stuff like that, so they can go in and do a transaction. That's what's going on right now, because their currency is inflating so bad. I mean, in Argentina last year it was 40%. Imagine waking up as an American on January 1st and you've got $40,000 in your bank, and then by December 31st it's worth about $1. That's incredible.
Yeah. So you had a question, and we'll have this be our last one. Did you have a question?
Yeah. So Bitcoin mining, known to use a lot of energy.
8.3 gigawatts currently today.
Yes. And so we had a U.S. congressperson that proposed the New Green Deal.
Mm-hmm.
And although it didn't go through, I'm sure that topic is not going to go away. So share a comment about how you see that conversation playing out.
Ask people how much electricity they think Facebook uses, or Google, or Netflix, or any large media consumption. It uses more than 8.4 gigawatts, I can assure you. When you're building a decentralized computer, never forget that Bitcoin, like according to the white paper, it was intended to be this fast, frictionless, peer-to-peer cash, but it's built on top of what is known as a form of decentralized computer. Obviously, that's going to consume electricity. There's no harm in consuming electricity if you have a useful byproduct. And actually, what that electricity consumption has done has actually taught people, and I say this as the reason I'm here in the US today is because Bitcoin taught our company how to build more intelligent data centers that now NVIDIA is championing us. That's powerful. So when the government gets very concerned about the energy consumption, you need to say to them, look at what this has done for the global ecosystem. It's given gas companies and solar farms and wind farms a way to reuse that electricity, monetize what would eventually just go into the ground or actually be wasted. It's encouraged data centers that are able to deal with the thermal footprint of new AI equipment. It's encouraged innovation around containers, around PSUs, around reusable energy. That's a powerful narrative, and that wouldn't have happened if there wasn't Bitcoin propelling that space. And I'm seeing this globally. I mean, everywhere you go, you're seeing people that are starting to build data centers, which is great. So that would be my comment on that. It's good. Energy consumption is good. We just need to do something useful with it.
That's probably the best answer.
Is
I've
it really
ever heard
consumption when we're creating a value?
to that question?
Yeah, it's still consumption.
It's still consumption.
But the byproduct is at least valuable, which is
Is it more
good.
valuable than somebody watching movies?
I don't know, man. Don't ask me that.
Is it actually? Would you consider it a byproduct if the product is Bitcoin? Like
Yes.
securing the Bitcoin network.
100% I would consider it a byproduct because when you are securing the Bitcoin network, you're generating byproducts which are Bitcoin. That becomes your byproduct. We're going through something to do with manufacturing the blockchain right now, so I'm in my headspace. But actually, yes, the Bitcoin is a byproduct.
So the Bitcoin's the byproduct
of the manufacturing
securing the
process.
network.
Yeah, it
Interesting.
is. Yeah, it is.
That's fun.
Common question. I read that.
We can do it afterwards.
Yeah, some of the hydro, they were using Bitcoin as a way to storage energy.
Yep.
Of the surplus.
Correct.
Can you comment on that, or can you elaborate that? Is that true?
It is true. Yes, it is true.
Like when they have all this electricity, they don't know how to sell it. They
So
just
much. And here's the thing about hydropower. You can't actually use it for traditional AI data centers because it's not stable. So the example I'll just go back to is China. China's rainy season is only for about 6 months, but then you have to move your assets out because the hydro cannot fulfill your demand anymore. It's not good for like an AI workload or anything, you know, that people are going to be consuming, but for Bitcoin or for cryptocurrency mining, it's perfect. So this is actually incredibly valuable to a lot of energy companies. So that happens.
Yeah, that's probably the best answer you're ever going to hear on like the whole energy consumption when it comes to Bitcoin.
Well, I witnessed the community in Tri-Cities and Yakima, the HVAC people. This
Yep.
is 4 or 5 years ago. They were kind of like reviewing every single watt, every single little piece of air,
Yeah.
how they were moving. And it was teams of HVAC people,
Yeah.
you know, solar power people. It's a lot of huge community working in Yakima and Tri-Cities, making extreme efficient
Yep.
mining farms.
And the craziest thing is, we had you know, our SVP of Tech Ops. He took GoDaddy public, so he knows data centers, and it was amazing to actually have him come to our facilities, and he was just shocked. He was like, "You don't have HVAC? You're just using passive air?" Everything that goes into mining is really custom tuned, and it's amazing how you can cool megawatts of equipment at such a large scale. I mean, to put it in comparison, one of, I believe it's Google's largest data center is 24 megawatts. Like, they have many of them, but their largest single one is 24 megawatts. They struggle to cool that with HVAC. We cool today 75 megawatts in one of our sites with no HVAC, so
Wow.
that's
Wow.
pretty cool.
That's insane.
Yeah.
Impressive.
Very cool. Very cool.